Hey guys, this is James McCool, aka McMahon with Alabama Drone Racers, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to build this, the Focus 220 from Rocket City FPV. We're going to be running a Motolab Typhoon F4 with the stackable integrated VTX, and it's just going to make for a nice, easy, super clean build. Gotta be one of the easiest quads to build out there right now. And in my opinion, it's definitely one of the most reliable and most fun to fly. Come check it out. Okay guys, for this build we are going to be using the Focus 220 frame. I'm going to show you guys how to put that together first. We're going to be using the Motolab Typhoon flight controller, which is flight controller and PDB all in one. We're going to be using the Motolab VTX, which is specifically stackable to be integrated into the flight controller with these pins here. I'll talk more about that in a little while. We're going to be using Emax RS 2205 2600 kV red bottoms. We're going to be using a Foxeer camera, Pagoda antenna, and of course we're going to be using the BLHeli LittleBee 30 amp ESCs. So I'm going to go ahead show you guys how to put the frame together first, then we'll talk more about this flight controller and the components we're using. See you in a second. Okay, so for this frame we're going to have our bottom plate, front and rear, our four arms, our center plate, which is going to sandwich the arms to the bottom plate, and then our top plate here. Okay guys, so you're going to have two different types of screws. You'll have four of these. These will be the longest screws that come in your pack, and then you'll have a really small screw, and then you've got this medium screw. Ooh, get that one out of there. So the way this frame is going to go together to put the arms on, you're going to run these long ones through this 3D printed receiver tray that's going to go on the very bottom. I think I forgot to mention it earlier. Okay. The next one is going to be one of these medium screws. That's going to go here, and the arm will sit on top of those two. Okay, and then the other medium screw we're actually going to run down, and then we're going to put a nut on bottom. Okay, and then of course the center plate will go on top of that, and these inside ones will go in these it's made to lock into there, so there's no nut needed, and the middle one is going to go into a standoff. So that's how they're all going to lock down. Go ahead and just put a, well, I'll need the middle plate, but the standoff will go on top of the middle plate. So I'm going to go ahead and put all that together, and then I will show you guys what it looks like. Alright guys, so to show you guys what I was talking about, you have those long screws coming through this receiver holder first. Okay, and they're going to go up through the bottom plate, arm, and center plate, and they're going to thread right into these, which are made to thread, so you don't have to have a nut on top. So that's in there nice and secure. The middle of the three screws in each arm comes up through bottom plate, arm, middle plate, and it goes into a standoff. And then the outside one just goes through the middle plate, arm, bottom plate, and has a nut that's on bottom. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten everything up. I'm actually going to well, I'll show you guys this real quick. So top plate is just going to have a camera sitting in this mount, just so y'all can get an idea. And then it's going to go there, and we'll screw on our four top pieces, and this is what the actual frame will look like. Okay, so there's not really a point in me doing that other than to show you guys what it's going to look like when it's done. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step and continue building. So I absolutely despise this next part. I don't know, on all my builds I hate it, but it has to be done. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and solder up the XT60 to the board. You can see here, where's my pointer at? Here it is. Okay, so we've got our positive and our negative. For the love of all that's good, don't get those confused, because when you plug in the battery, I just don't even want to imagine what will happen. So we're going to go ahead, solder the XT60 on. That way we can get to the more fun stuff. Cool. Alright guys, so I've got the XT60 soldered on here. Don't pay attention to my solder joints, they are not the best, but they are going to work. What I've done is I've taken the regular standoffs off of the frame, and I'm going to do a Sogo special. Sogo is one of the guys that works for Rocket City FPV. He showed me this method. So far I like it the best, to be able to cut and solder wires to the flight controller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take two old standoffs that I had lying around, just these little plastic standoffs. I'm going to put two of them on the board, or on the frame, I'm sorry, and then I'm going to put the board on top of those standoffs. Now the board is going to sit, or the flight controller is going to sit a little bit lower once we're all done, but this is going to give me kind of the idea and the roundabouts for the length I need to cut my wires. I'm going to actually tighten it down onto here so that it's not going to go anywhere. And I can sit here and I can put my ESCs on and do whatever I got to do as far as soldering, and I don't have to worry about holding the flight controller, making sure that I'm cutting everything right, because it's going to be on here only about 1 millimeter or 2 off of where it's actually going to be when it's all mounted up. So let me get these all nice and tight. And this is going to allow me to take some tweezers, okay, grab whatever wire I need and feed it up through the board. Let me see if I can get that. So I'm just going to grab my wires, feed it up through the board, put it where it needs to go. Motolab does recommend for you to run your wires up underneath the board, and it's going to make it just a much cleaner build that way. So let me go ahead, grab an ESC, and I'm going to show you guys how we're going to mount it up, or how we're going to solder it up, and yeah. Alright guys, I've flipped y'all around so you can see what I'm seeing, and I'm just going to tell you about where we're going to do our ESCs, and then we're going to just solder them up one at a time. So you can see up here where it's got the name of the board, Motolab Typhoon F4. The arrow means it's pointing forward. So this is, let's see if I can get y'all up. This is the front of the quad, so we want that arrow pointing forward. I've actually got my pinout over here on my computer, and what it's telling me is for this ESC, of course the positive and negative are labeled on the board. You can see those with the camera, positive, negative, and then we're going to have our signal wire in this hole here. Try to come up over the top so y'all can see a little better. So this is going to be our signal wire here, and right beside it is going to be our ground. Over here, signal wire, ground, signal wire ground, and signal wire ground. So if I'm not mistaken, one of the ways that I remember this best is if you'll see down here, signal wire ground. The ground is to the left of the signal wire when you're looking at the board this way. Signal wire ground, and then up here it flips, okay, because this is the front right now pointing down. So signal wire ground is still on the left. So signal wire ground is on the left. So that's an easy way for me to remember, is that when I'm doing these ESCs, I always want my ground to be on the left. So we're going to go ahead, grab the first ESC. I'm going to talk about where I'm going to place it on the quad and start soldering. Okay guys, so before I get too far into the ESC part, there's something I want to show you guys. Rocket City, as you've seen with like the camera mount, they're just looking for new ways to innovate using TPU and make things work better and also look better, because who doesn't like to pimp out their quad? So this is an old LittleBee 20 amp that I have, and I thought I would show y'all with this. They didn't send me these because they know that this just isn't my thing. I have a certain way that I do my builds. I'm a tape and like an electrical tape and double-sided tape kind of guy, and I'm going to show you guys that method, but I wanted to show you these, and they make these as well for the bigger 30 amps. They make them in all colors, so if I wanted to, I could get this ESC cover in the same TPU color that I'd be using for the rest of my quad. And what this does is it's just going to go over the ESC, okay? So it covers the bottom to keep it from grounding out, and then you run a zip tie through here, and it zip ties to the arm like that. So it really just adds a little bit to the color scheme. Like I said, that's not my cup of tea. So that's not the way that I'm going to be doing it. I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to be doing this build the way I typically do my builds, which is, like I said, with double-sided stick tape and the E-tape. Okay, guys, so the first thing I'm going to do, like I said, this is the way I like to do things. Other ways are just as good. I don't think there's really an official right or wrong, as I like to just take a little bit of electrical tape, and I like to wrap my arms. Before I did this method, I would have ESCs hit in a crash and short out. Oh, there's my scissors. And so ever since I've done this, I haven't had that problem anymore. So I'm just going to use just a little bit of electrical tape and wrap all my arms just like that. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do this arm with the ESC, and then I'm going to speed it up as I do the other three. Okay, so I've got my LittleBee 30 amp. That's what we're going to be using for this build. I like these ESCs a lot. They are D-shot ESCs. So I'm going to just get it where I want it. Typically for me, I try to butt it on these focuses. I try to butt the plastic right up against the carbon fiber here. So I'm going to get my double side tape, cut me a piece off. Scissors are right in front of my face. I'll take my double side, peel it off, so I got two sticky sides. And I'm going to drop it right there. Then I'll just take my ESC. Like I said, I'll butt it up right here. I may even add a little double side to the other. I'll just scoot this down so I can still butt my ESC up the way I want to. But if it's not centered, it wants to tilt just a little bit. I'm just going to press it down really, really good. Boom. There we go. So, where's my pointer? Remember, we've got, this is the front of the quad here, right? We got positive, negative, and this is going to be signal, and remember to the left side is ground. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my wires to where I want them, tin them up, and then we're going to feed them through the underside of the board. I'm going to do this positive and negative first because they're further back, so I want to do the further side, or the farthest side, the further side. I want to do the farther side first, okay, so they'll be up under there, and then the signal and ground, boop, we'll just attach right there. So I'm going to give myself a plenty of room to work with because it is an underside build, so I don't need a whole lot of room. That should be plenty. Get my wire cutters. I like these little guys. Okay. Let's do there. Sorry, I'm always like, what's the old saying? Measure twice, cut once. I don't ever want to cut too much off because I can always cut more. I can't always paste back. So there we go. Get that stripped. Ta-da! Nice. So I'm going to twist these up. I would usually go ahead and cut my signal and ground, have everything cut, and then do all my solders at once. I would actually do all of my ESCs at once. I would cut them all and tin them all up and then add them to the flight controller. But for the sake of doing this video and wanting to make sure I explain everything, that's why I'm doing it this way. So I'm just going to get my solder. I'm only going to add a little bit because I want these to still fit up through the board. And if they don't fit up through the, I keep saying the board, the flight controller, whatever, y'all know what I'm talking about. Okay, so just going to go ahead. Okay, just a little bit on there, nothing crazy. I've twisted my wires first, a little bit on there. A bit on the, see if I can, yeah, get it morphed around there a little bit. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my super tool here, the tweezers, a little strand poking off. Y'all probably can't see that on the video. Okay. I may not have tinned enough. Let's see if this will work. This is like the most tedious part of the entire build to me. There we go. So I've got it poked through. I don't like where my iron is. I'm trying to get my camera here. I'm just going to add a little solder to that. There we go. Nice little solder bubble when I pull on that wire. It's in there really good and tight. Be careful. You'll see what I did. I went straight noob on this. Let's see if I can show you guys this. So the method that I'm using where I have the standoff, and this is why I do the standoff first because it's the harder part. If you can see this here, I've got just a little bit of melting because I got my iron a little bit too close to that, but it's going to be just fine. I've done that only every single time I've ever built this quad, despite the fact that I know to watch out for that. I do it anyways. I guess it's more like a rite of passage. So you got to get this wire in the tweezers just right. Sometimes you got to bend it a little bit to get the angle. Oh yeah, and it pokes through like a little whack-a-mole. Make sure it's shoved up in there good so that when I hit it with this solder, dang, I don't know why I keep grabbing. I keep grabbing it to where my wire on my iron oops, sorry guys. I just realized that my camera. Oh yes. That's pretty. I like that. So we can see how the wires go up under there. They're good and taut. And little solder bubbles. Solder bubbles. Right there on the plus and minus. Also known as the positive and negative. So, here's the tricky ones. These stupid little tiny signal and ground wires, right? So I'm going to make sure I give myself plenty of length. That should be enough. Because remember, it's going to drop the flight controller down just a smidge when I put it all together. So, what I like about these smaller wires though, because I hate stripping stuff, is that you can just grab and pull. Dink! And then that should give me, I might go just a little bit more on old ground right here. Once again, measure twice, cut once. I'm going to tin these up with just a dab of solder. I'm going to twist them. Ta-da-da! Grab my iron backwards still. Haven't learned from my mistakes yet, so that's good. Just going to hit it with a dab. Yeah, that's all you need right there. Yep. That should help. I'm going to try to feed them now. So white is signal, black is ground. So once again, I kind of like working this a ways. I'm going to twist these up a little bit, keep it pretty. So I know y'all like pretty things. Go ahead and solder that up. I'm not going to get too fancy. It's hard to get you guys close to where you can see and the camera stay in focus. Ha! Focus. This quad's a focus, and I said focus. That's the name of the build. Clean that disgusting tip. And I'm just going to give it just a little wink. Yep. That should do it. And then I'm going to feed my ground wire up through. And once again, I'll probably say it a couple more times, this Pinout will be in the description. I will link the Pinout, the Rocket City FPV site Pinout, in the description. Yes, I know it doesn't have things labeled. It really doesn't matter because this quad is so easy to build, as I can't get the ground through the hole. There we go. Got it there. Grab my solder. Turn it to try to keep away from that signal. Yeah. Just a little more. Oh yeah, as I pull on those feel just fine. Cool, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and do that for the next 3 ESCs, and we're gonna go ahead and go to super fast forward mode so this video isn't too long, and we'll come back, we'll do the motors, and then shockingly, we're almost done. We'll just have a receiver and plug everything in. How awesome is that? I have one ESC on, one ESC, and I'm telling you guys how we're almost done. Isn't that crazy? So, hang tight. We're going to go super speed motion now while I do the rest of them, maybe with some cool jams, maybe some jams you hate. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys in just a minute. Alright guys, we're ready to put the motors on now. Once again, I'm using the Emax red bottom RS 2205 2600 kV motors. If I can get that to focus. You can take my word for it. These are the red bottoms. You've heard this name before. It's a really, really good motor. Very, very reliable. Is it the fastest in the world? No. I'll just be honest with you there. But this is a fantastic motor. I love these motors. That's why we're putting them on here today. So what I'm going to do is, once again, I'm going to do one, and then I'm going to speed it up for the other 3 so you guys don't have to sit here so bored. So I'm just going to take some of this thread locker blue. I'm going to dab it over here. Pour it out on my plastic. We'll do this motor. I think it's decent for the camera. So make sure the wires are facing the ESC. You need to line up the holes on the bottom. I'm just going to take one of my, I'm actually going to grab my tool here. This makes it a little easier. I'll put it in the screw. Just gonna dip it in the thread locker. Let me talk to you about this for just a second. So I'm using the shorter screws that come with these motors. There's 2 different screw lengths. I am using the shorter ones because I have had the screw be a little bit too long, and when I say a little bit, I mean just a little bit too long. It was nothing that was super noticeable, and it what'll happen, if you didn't know this, I'm sure most of you do, it will touch the windings inside the motors, and it was so barely to where it could short that it would only do it at full throttle. Low throttle, mid throttle, nothing. As soon as I would hammer out, I would lose power to that motor because it would short out, start flickering. So since then, if I think that a screw will work, even if I just dropped that. I'm actually going to use this one then. If I think a screw will work, even though if I'm maybe worried it's a little too short, if I think it'll survive and hold with some thread lock, I'll use it. Because that's the last thing I want to happen again, is to short out. And I use the thread lock because I got so scared from my short out that I ran some short screws without thread lock, and wouldn't you guess it, the screws backed out mid-flight, motor came off the arm, of course quad came out of the sky, which was not good either. So learn through my mistakes. We're not going to cross any wires here because I'm going to change it all over on the computer through BLHeli. That ESC could even stand to come in just a little bit. I'm just going to move it in just a fuzz. Yeah, nothing I've done is permanent yet. Super permanent at least. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to strip these wires to length, solder them directly to the pads. This is really cut and dry. I'm sure I'll screw it up since I said that, but I am going to leave just a little bit of space. I live by the belief that I'd rather have, once again, too much wire than not enough. So I'm going to cut these all to where they are going to curl up just a little bit when I solder them. Good Lord, that one's too long. However, that's actually going to give us just a little bit of flex if I was to break an arm. I think if they're like soldered really short in a straight line, while it does look pretty, once again, I'm kind of more of a functionality guy, and I think a little bit of excess wire can save you a long, expensive headache. So, got these cut to where I want them. I'm just going to twist the ends, tin the ends, tin the pads, and connect them up. Once again, I'll talk about this focus some more. I just freaking love how easy of a build it is. I love this flight controller VTX combo. I think that Moto did an awesome job designing it. I think he definitely was designing it with ease in mind. I'm not good with complicated things. I'll be the first to admit that. But this I'm pretty comfortable doing and building, thanks to them taking a lot of unnecessary steps out of the build process with this board. So yeah, I'm just going to solder nice little glob on here. And then I'm just going to hit these. Little 10. Little 10, little 10. Ooh, lot 10. That's because I need to clean my tip. I'll just take that right off. I'm gonna grab my handy dandy super high speed tweezers. If you don't use tweezers for a build, I mean, what do you use? So yeah, I'm just gonna curl my wire, let it snake just a bit. I'm gonna hit this bottom solder to soften it up. Then I'll hit the motor wire that I pre-tinned, bring it down. Make sure it's on there really good. Because I've also, once again, my soldering skills aren't what you would call the best in the world. So I have had cold solder joints. So yeah, I'm not doing this video because I'm the best focus builder of all time. I'm doing this video. I think it's good for me to do it because if I can build this quad, anybody can. Yep, I don't like what I'm doing here. Cool, I've got those connected now. So, once again, don't judge my soldering skills. That's not what this is about. But I've got one motor connected up. And if anything, if I wanted to move that ESC back to where I had it, now I can kind of let those wires curl, slide it back down. Super easy. I'm going to go ahead and do the other 3 motors, high speed. You guys enjoy, watch, and we'll do the receiver, talk about the VTX, and keep on trucking. Okay guys, so all of our motors are soldered up, our ESCs are soldered to the flight controller. One other thing we need to do, we're going to go ahead and get ahead of the game here, and we are going to solder our receiver on. I'm going to be using the FrSky XM Plus receiver, just this little guy. I've liked it so far. So all I'm going to need is 3 wires, right? So I'm going to need my signal wire, my power wire, and my ground. If you look at the pinout, 5R is this one. So this was signal 4, ground for our ESCs. 4T, we're not going to use. Let me actually bring you guys in close. I'm so sorry. See if I can do this without putting my elbow in the jelly. So this one, 4T, we're not going to use, so we're going to skip that one. We're going to use 5R on the diagram, which is UART 5 for S-Bus, and then we're going to use skip 1, use 5R, then we're going to use V, which is 5-volt output, which is going to power our receiver, and then we're going to use the ground, which is right here beside it. And once again, you've got your power, and then just to the left of it, you've got ground. Okay, just like when we did those ESC. So we'll skip 1, signal for our S bus if you're using FrSky like me, power, and then ground. Okay, so I'm going to turn the quad around to solder this stuff up. I have this, which I believe is a camera cable that I just had lying around. If you buy a receiver, you'll get whatever cable you need, but this fits over my pins. I really don't know if it's that way or this way, but I'll figure that out in a little while before I turn everything on. This receiver is actually already bound to my transmitter, so shouldn't be a lot of work there. I am going, okay, so I'm going to drop this connector down in the tray. I want to give myself plenty of room. I'd rather have, like I said before, so if I drop it down this hole, that's what that hole is for your receiver. It's going to sit down here in this little receiver tray. So I'm just going to drop the connector down in there. I could take the cover off. There's really not a need to. I'm going to give myself lots of room here, and I'm going to snip my wires. I'm going to tin them up, and then I'm going to feed through under the board like we've been doing. So just snip them all right there. That's more than enough room. And I'm going to go ahead. And some people don't like the fact that the board isn't labeled, but it's really easy just to have the pinout on your phone, or I'll be at a race somewhere and I'll just go to the Rocket City FPV website. I'll try to go straight to the pinout because otherwise I'll try to buy something. I need to stop buying things. So I'm going to go ahead and tin these wires. I can just leave them hanging out there because remember, we're just going to zap just a little bit of tin on there, a little bit of solder on there, and that way it'll fit up through the hole. I need to twist these because I can already see one is spread out a lot. Do that. Ooh, that's way more than I wanted. Probably help if I'm like the world's worst about cleaning the tip of my soldering iron, as you've been able to see through this video. That's what we wanted there. I feel like I need to fix this power one, or it's never gonna fit through the hole. We gotta have it fit through the hole. That should do it. Whew. Had some solder jump on me there. That was a little toasty. Okay, so I'm gonna feed my wires through. I'm looking, once again, I look at my freaking pinout on my computer like 700 times because measure 50 times, cut once, right? So it's gonna go coming off of this. We're going to go signal, bink, power, ground. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and feed my signal wire up. We'll skip 4T and go in right up in old 5R. Got that wire sticking up through there. Clean that. Grab my solder. Yep. Kaboom. And then it's going to be power. Yep. 5-volt regulated power for the receiver. which is good to know if anybody's wondering. It is 5-volt regulated regulators. So I'm going to stick that power wire up through there, let it chill, grab my iron, solder it up. I usually play music when I build, and if you've seen me through the fast forward processes, dancing and head bobbing, I can't really dance very well, but I try. But I didn't figure y'all wanted to listen to my Taylor Swift on repeat. Right. I got that ground up through there. Up through there. Yucky, yucky tip. Yucky, yucky. Sweet. So, receiver is soldered up, and we can move on to the next step. We are getting there, guys and gals. Love this build. Sweet. Next step. Okay, guys, so the next thing that we're going to do is talk about putting the VTX onto the flight controller. Remember, it's integrated, so I've already taken off my little standoff. So talk about this for soft mount. It's just floaty, floaty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys probably about the easiest way to put this together using these 3D printed parts. I know a lot of you guys watch the Joshua Bardwell video where he talked about the frame and how hard that it can be to take things apart. But I'm going to show you guys a little trick that we do in order, so we remove the standoffs from the bottom, and that kind of opens everything up where you can tighten down the flight controller and the VTX. So Joshua Bardwell, you're going to learn something today. I had to. Let's check it out. So probably the easiest way to put these on here for the first time is you're going to put your VTX on first, and you got to be careful and make sure that these pins line up perfectly. And you're going to feel it just kind of slide in there nice and snug. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a 3D printed piece that's going to wedge between here and make sure that it protects everything and keeps it in place. I'll run a bolt up through the bottom. Yep, just like that. Gotta love brand new TPU. And then I'll put a nut on top to secure it. And I'll just hand tighten that for now. Hell, I'll tighten it all the way. I usually don't go much more than hand tight anyways. And then what you're going to do is, when you get it, I'll show you this first. When you get it all snug, your standoff is going to run down through here. And it's going to connect via a screw that's coming up through the bottom of the board. So what we do when we work on these is we actually pull these. Ooh, lighting's bad. We pull these 4 bolts where the standoffs are, and we leave the top plate on. And when we pull the top plate, all the standoffs slide out of there, and it gives us a lot more room to work. So you may not have to unsolder your ESCs, but you can see you'll end up, when I tape them at the end, you'll end up having to untape them and just leave them where you can get some flex here. And that's probably about the easiest way to work on it. I don't feel like it was as complicated or as cumbersome as some people thought it was. I like this design. I like the 3D printed TPU. And I think that for what it is, especially using the TPU just to innovate, something different, you know, get away from the same old, same old. So we're just going to lock that nut down. Just going to hand tighten it. There we go. We got two more. Slide them in here. I do a lot better when I'm not trying to explain something and I'm concentrating. Sometimes you got to break through that new TPU. Probably should have done a screw through it first. So for those of you who don't know about this board, those pins that we slid into the flight controller, you know, is made for, this VTX is made for this flight controller. Those pins do everything. Everything the flight controller needs, from power to whatever else that I don't really understand. It is all done through those pins. So there's really no more soldering. What we're going to do is we're going to get this VTX locked on the flight controller. Freaking push through that new TPU. Really should have pushed these bolts through. You kind of got to, when new TPU prints, you kind of got to break through it. Tighten it down real good by hand. Sweet. And then that's how that is going to look. I can go ahead now and I can lock my ESCs back down onto my double-sided stick. Okay, I'm going to get my wires out of the way. And now it's time to take these standoffs. We're going to run them down through here. And we're going to find the bolt that needs to come up through the underside, which is right here in front of my face. So I'm going to do these loose at first so I can make sure they all line up. But if you can see here, I'm going to run the bolt through. As you can see here, I'm going to run the bolt through. There it goes. I'm going to attach it to the standoff. And where's my tool? I'm just going to tighten it down. I'm really hoping the camera's catching this because I've been forgetting about my camera angle. So I can tighten this down really tight. Okay. We'll go repeat the same thing. I like to come across and hit the opposite side one next. I like that as of right now I'm missing two of my metal standoffs because my workbench is absolutely destructo. Through there. Just going to screw that in. It's going to pull that flight controller down nice and tight. Hey, I see my standoffs. Yay, standoffs. Slide these through. Make sure they line up. Sorry, camera. Everybody's watching like, we can't see. My phone's ringing. Let's mute that. My last standoff is already through there. So I'm just going to take this bolt, line it up. Get it nice and tight. Boom. And now we have our flight controller and VTX mounted to the frame. Look how pretty that is. Cool. I'm going to cut the video so I'm not doing too long of a piece at once, and I'm going to come right back, talk about putting the top plate on the camera and the receiver. We are that close. Okay guys, so the next thing we want to do, go ahead and get it out of the way while we still have some space, is we want to put the pigtail on the board. The pigtail is going to go through this hole in the frame, and the top part is going to connect here, and we've got a super nifty thing that Motolab has done for us here to make that less of a headache. I know a lot of you guys have used hot glue and epoxy and all sorts of stuff in the past to keep this connector from coming off, but if you'll notice those two holes in the board, I'm going to show you something a lot cooler than that. And I better move my, if you haven't guessed yet by me moving that zip tie, we're going to use that zip tie. So we're just going to take this, slide it up through, okay, take this nut and just screw it right on top. And I'm going to grab some pliers here in just a second to help get it real tight. See if you guys can see that. I'm going to tighten it up and then I'll show you what it looks like. Probably better ways to tighten it up than that. That's the way I usually do it. And what I do is I typically, so that's how it's going to sit on there. I typically turn this pigtail to the right. You can usually kind of hold the top piece and wrench it down. That's not going to go anywhere. That's what our antenna is going to mount on. That's going to keep us from breaking the VTX. And check this out. This is what I was talking about. Motolab did these two holes here, right on each side. And if you could guess, I'm sure you all could, we're just going to run a zip tie down through the hole, through one of the holes. Which it can be tricky to run, but this isn't something you're going to be doing all the time. Even when I take my quad completely apart, I never snip this zip tie. I just leave the pigtail connected. So we're going to do that. You're going to take this connector right here, for any of you who've done these connectors before, they can be a little weird to push on there. There it goes. Kind of heard it pop into place. I'm going to take this zip tie and just lock it down over the top. So, no need for hot glue, no need for craziness. Just going to have this zip tie in place, and I'm really going to try to wrench down on this zip tie to make sure it's as tight as possible. And then I'll snip off the excess. Sometimes I'll go ahead and roll it over too. That's not going anywhere. I mean, really not going anywhere. Another thing, these dip switches here, these are how you change the power output. It does have a little piece of plastic. I'm just going to grab it. Let's say I'm going to grab it. And I'll just pull it off. and those dip switches will control the power output. There is a pinout that I will also put in the description that has a picture for what settings. This VTX is adjustable to 25 milliwatt, 200 milliwatt, and 500 milliwatt via these dip switches. And once we put the top plate on there, I'll show you can access these dip switches with a small screwdriver while the drone is completely put together, so that's really nice. So we've got the VTX on, we've got the pigtail connector zip tied down where it's not going anywhere. You can see I kind of tucked the pigtail over to the side. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead, we're going to put the camera inside the camera mount, and then we're going to put the top plate on, and we're going to be extremely close. If I'm not mistaken, all we're going to have to do is mess with our receiver, and then we'll be done. So I'm just going to grab some of these screws out of the camera bag. Put that over to the side. And I need a tiny screwdriver that I don't have on me, so I'm going to cut the video real quick and I'm going to come back with my screwdriver. We're going to put the camera in and I'm going to show you how we connect it to the VTX. Alright, see you in just a second. Alright guys, so now I've got everything that I thought I had before, so we're going to go ahead and talk about how to do this camera. I've got my camera screws here. The camera mount is going to sit on the front. Those tabs are going to go in the holes, but to put the camera in it, you're just going to move this TPU, slide it down in here, and there's holes in the side, and you're just going to make those camera anchor holes where the screws go in line up, and sometimes they even pop kind of into place. Yep, I just felt it pop there. And I'm going to take this lens cover off because that's hindering me right now. Okay, so that's going to be our camera. Goodness, I love this camera lens. So, real quick, this is the Foxeer XAT 600M 600 TVL camera, also known as HS 1177. Very common camera for FPV. So we've got it seated in here. I'm going to grab one of my screwdrivers, take one of these screws, and then I'm just going to screw it to where the camera doesn't pop out of this TPU. I honestly think as snug as it fits in here, I could probably just stick it on the quad. I don't recommend doing that. But it just is such a good fit that when it's in the quad and everything's all tightened down, I just don't see that camera going anywhere. And it's kind of got already pre-done adjustments here. 20 degrees, 30, and then maxed out is 40 degrees, I believe. We're just going to leave it right there for building purposes. Now check this out. This is one of the coolest parts of the build, and this is what like saves so much time when you do this VTX. You're going to get this cable here, and it's going to have you know, your power, ground, your video, but it's also going to have an OSD cable. That way you can access what you would need to access through the OSD camera settings through your stick menu. So I'm just going to make sure that I line it up red, black, yellow, other color because I'm colorblind, and it's just going to plug right into the VTX and then right into the camera. And how easy is that to connect your camera to your VTX? I'll push this wire down where it's out of the way, and then these tabs, if you can see, if I get some light where I want it, there's two tabs. Where's my pointer at? I'm going to use this tool. There's a tab here and a tab here, and that's what these tabs are just going to kind of slide and fit snug. And I've heard people ask, you know, those tabs wear out over time. I've never had an issue with them wearing out. So I'm just going to push my wires out of the way, slide that camera to where it sits, and you can see it sits flush on the bottom as well where those tabs are at. I'll take my top plate and it's going to have 2 cutouts for the tabs on top. I'm going to slide those tabs into place, and then of course the holes are already right over my standoff. I'm going to screw this top plate down. I'm going to get all 4 started, and then we'll tighten it on down. Even in places like this where I really don't think it matters to get screws started first and then tighten down, it's just always good practice to do. So that everything tightens evenly. Oh! Forgot a piece. Why'd y'all let me forget a piece? Real quick. See, I'm actually going to let this mistake stay on the video. So I looked down and I was like, why am I seeing black on these standoffs? Let's take 2 seconds to show y'all. These last 4 3D printed pieces right here, okay, are actually just to make your standoffs like look better. So it's going to go over the top, and that way the whole standoff is in that TPU color of your choice. There's a small notch in it that's probably not going to pick up on the video, but the notch is going to go towards the flight controller, and that's going to make it fit snug without pushing against, I'm sorry, the VTX, not the flight controller. So I'm going to put those last 4 TPU pieces on, and then I'm going to go right back to with my top plate and tightening my screws. It's okay to make mistakes. Just don't do it while you're trying to show everybody how to build a quad. Guys are going to be like, how can we trust him? He forgot the TPU. That one started. One. Almost done, guys. The last thing we're going to do, because I don't want to forget, is we're going to go ahead and throw that antenna on, because I don't want to be doing testing, plug a battery in, and then freak out because I left my antenna on. With this VTX, you do need to make sure that you never power on without an antenna in place. So we're going to go ahead, throw that on. Tighten it good. And this is our build. I really think it's a good looking quad. It's very functional. I'm going to do some flight footage. There's a couple of things I want to go over with you guys in beta flight, because there's one thing about the VTX that a lot of people don't know, and I want to show you guys how to remedy that real quick. But yeah, I like to put a piece of prop and some E-tape over the ESCs for protection. So we're going to add that in the video just because that's what a complete build is to me. So yeah, looks good. Very, very clean. I'm very happy with how it turned out. Just not a lot of wires going many places. That's what I love about this build. Okay, I'm going to cut the camera. We're going to come back. I'm going to talk about, I need to go over making sure our motors are going the right direction, and talk about the camera with the VTX and how to download your fonts. Okay guys, I almost forgot something super important. Apparently today I'm forgetting all the important things. We need to pop this receiver tray off really quick so we can actually add our receiver. So we can just unscrew these 4 down here on the bottom, and remember we put that receiver plug, it's going to be right here in this tray when we pop the tray off. We put our receiver in, all we're going to have to do is plug it up, make sure it binds. I've already got this receiver bound to this transmitter, so we won't have to go through any kind of binding process. And if you need to know how to bind your receiver to your quad, then I'm sure you can find a YouTube video for that. I'm going to be using an XM Plus. For the sake of ease in this video, I'm just going to throw it on here real quick, but I needed to add it, obviously, to the build video. Always have to like line this up with my picture so I don't screw it up. That, like that. I'm just going to plug in this straight into my pins. Of course, if you like to direct solder to your receiver and all that jazz, you can do that. But since we're just doing a focus build video, I'm really not going to go into all the different options there. Going to make sure my, oh yeah, I remember what I like to do. This receiver is really small. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut some of my double side. You can tell also I love some double-sided stick tape. So I'm going to cut my double-sided stick tape. I'm going to have a unnecessarily hard time of unsticking the back. And I'm just going to double-side it down. It really wouldn't go anywhere anyways, but I like the added security of the double side. Now it's definitely not going to go anywhere. I'm going to throw these 4 bolts back in the tray, tighten them down. As far as my antenna wires, I'm going to show you what I do and is very frowned upon, but I've never had any issues for racing, which is tape them to the arms. Ooh, I know that there's like I would say 7 million, but 7 million people aren't going to watch this video. So there's 7 people who are yelling at me like, no, taping it to the carbon is bad for the reception. That may be so, but at a race, how often are you that far away? I haven't had any fail-safes doing this, knock on wood. And I didn't have any fail-safes doing that when I was using a Turnigy Evolution. I definitely haven't had any issues with fail-safes with a QX7 running FrSky. Because you know when you run FrSky, you never fail-safe. And let all the haters chime in. Cool, I've got that tray tightened back up. My receiver is now connected. I know that it's already bound to a certain channel on my remote, so I'm good there. What we're going to do is I needed to show you guys the stuff for the VTX and what usually happens when you power it on for the first time. It's not a big deal as long as you know what to do. So I'm going to cut the video and come right back. So now that we've got everything put together, I want to talk with y'all real quick about one of the #1 things that makes people freak out when they first build this quad. I want to go ahead and cover it here. We shouldn't have any more questions about it just because once you figure out how to do it, then it solves everything. You never have to do this again. So here's what happens. I'm going to turn you guys around. I've got my screen here. Okay, I'm going to power on the quad. Oh my gosh, what is all this Chinese craziness on the screen? There's a bunch of V's. Happened to me too, the very first time I ever did this. Okay, here's what you're going to need to do to remedy that. I'm going to unplug real quick. Ooh, that one hand unplugged. And I'm going to connect us if my cord will reach. I'm going to connect this to Betaflight. Connect. As you can see, I moved the quad. Okay. So what you're going to do, you're going to go to the OSD tab here on the side. Click OSD. This is the screen where you can control all your OSD stuff. All my crap's on right now. I'm going to go to Font Manager down here in the bottom right hand corner. Click that. It's going to bring up this screen. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in. Try to hold this camera and plug in at the same time. Okay, and now I'm just going to go click Upload Font. It's uploading. As soon as that gets done, this thing's going to cycle, and boom. My screen looks crazy because all my OSD tab stuff is still on, but if I go over here, I don't know why Betaflight, they're like, you need everything. But if I start turning this stuff off, and as I turn it off, shoot, you can look at the screen. You're going to see everything start to go away. Screen's going to look a lot less crazy. I'm not used to clicking on the computer with my left hand. So there's a lot of tabs, a lot of things you can get on this Betaflight OSD. I'm still just going to keep clicking to show you guys a clean screen. Dang, there's so much stuff. I thought that was it, and then I was like, there's still stuff on the screen. Still clicking, and you can see how much cleaner the screen is looking already. And boom, my screen should be completely blank. On the computer, it shows that the OSD should be blank. My screen is blank, and just to show y'all, for anybody not in Alabama, I'm going to just do a power cycle real quick. And there we have it. Okay, got like a screen inception going on with my drone. But we've got a nice clean screen. Everything's good. Just for good measure, I'm going to come back to Betaflight, and I'm going to hit save. Disconnect. I'm going to disconnect the battery. Disconnect the USB port. Lord, that USB's tight. Okay, and what's up? Just a couple more things I want to do. I think actually just for the build video, that's got you guys up in the air. As far as doing your receiver, you can do that on your own. It's going to depend on if you use Spectrum, FrSky, what are the other ones? FlySky, Turnigy, all those things. You can set up your receivers, and Betaflight is standard on its own. But as far as the focus, the last thing that I do to all my builds is going to be to make sure my motors are in the right direction, and I'll show you guys how to do that. And then when we get those set, we're going to cover our ESCs, and we're going to call the build done. Okay guys, so I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to get the ESCs set up. I'm going to plug in here. I've got BLHeli configurator on my computer, so we're just going to plug in. Once it picks up, you're going to hit connect. Props are off, of course. If you've never done this before, I didn't know how to do this before I did know, because that's how everything in life works. You're actually going to plug in It's not going to cycle the whole tone. Then you're going to come here and go to sleep mode, and go to read setup. It's going to read it. Our ESCs are way off right now, and they're all spinning the normal direction. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop all these down to like 1016. Okay. So I got all four of them down at 1016. We want the max throttle. They obviously need it to put out. I think I always bump mine slightly over 2000. I have my other one set at 2008. I'm sure somebody's gonna tell me that's wrong, but this is a build video, not a I know everything about BLHeli video, because I don't. And I'm just going to assume, I believe it is 2 and 3 that I need to reverse. So I'm going to go ahead and hit reversed and reversed. And then I'm going to write the setup. It should be good. I'm going to make sure it's saved. I'm going to unplug my power. I'm going to reconnect. I don't know if you have to do that cycle, but for lack of not knowing, I'm going to read setup, and all my stuff is where I left it. Okay, so I've got the motor directions fixed, min throttle I've got at 1016, max throttle at 2008. Cool. It's everything where I want it, and I'm going to go ahead, disconnect. You'll hear it cycle the rest of the way. Let's go ahead and just check this junk. I'm going to unplug. My controller is on, so I'm going to arm. Fail. All of them are going the wrong direction, so I'm going to go back in. Let me disarm. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to change the ones I had normal to reversed, and change the ones I got reversed back to normal. So lots of failage on this video, but that's okay, because we got to learn. Okay, I'm going to go to read setup. I'm going to go to reversed, normal, normal, and reversed. Let's go to right setup. Okay, and let's disconnect, let it cycle, pull the USB, battery's still plugged in. I'm going to arm. That one's good, that one's good, that one's good, and that one's good. So now I've got them going the right way. Disarm, arm. Fantastic. Cool. I'm going to cut the camera, come back. We're going to tape up these ESCs and call this a finished build. Alright, we're back. Let's go ahead and cover these ESCs so we can do a quick hover test and call this a done build. So I'm just going to cut. Once again, we are back to the double-sided stick tape. That's impossible to pull. I'm going to just throw it on top of the ESC. I'm going to take a piece of cut prop. I'm going to mount it right on top. And I like to make sure that this covers my end solder joints. I'm just going to push it down nice and tight. Then I take the electrical tape. I'm going to start in over the prop. And I'm just going to wrap it nice and tight. I try to keep all the wrinkles out. And that's how that's going to look. To me, it's nice, neat, and clean, and it holds down everything that I want it to hold down. The only other thing I'm going to do when I speed up the video is I'm going to take these receiver wires and I'm just going to tape them to the arm like that and cover them with the E-tape that I cover everything else with. So, cool. Let's speed it up and get it done. Okay, guys, we're done. This is the Focus 220 V2 running the Motolab Typhoon F4 with integrated stackable VTX. Easy, awesome build. I love this quad. It's my favorite one of all that I've got right now. It's just an all-around good quad. It's fast, it's a tank, and it hasn't let me down yet. So I want to throw a big shout out to Damone with Rocket City FPV, Wendell with Motolab. Really appreciate such an awesome product. I know that a lot of us at Alabama Drone Racers, as well as Rocket City FPV Racing, fly this exact setup, maybe with a different motor and ESC combo, but we see a lot of these at our events, and there's a reason why. They're reliable and they're super easy to build, especially for beginners. If you're ever hesitant on building a quad, then I hope that you'll try the Focus 220. I hope that you'll check out my build video, and I hope that it helps you guys. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments below. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to do a separate video that is highlighting this maiden voyage, and I also want to talk about the OSD features and how to access those and what all you can use them for. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see you next time.